What if you could take that risk, make that change, reach that goal, live your best life? Welcome to another episode of the What If You Could podcast, where we get together with amazing experts and everyday people who share challenges, encourage healing, and explore the possibilities that life has to offer. I'm your host, Gary Scott, and I'm excited that you're along for the ride. Welcome back to another episode of What If You Could. And in this episode, it's episode 2 with Dr. Mark McDonald, author of Freedom from Fear, talking about the addiction that many people have of fear, and also as a nation, our addiction to fear. In this episode, Dr. McDonald goes on to tell us about how individuals can move away from their addiction to fear. So I hope you enjoy this episode of What If You Could. And again, thank you so much for listening. Please give us a like, a share, or any comments regarding our episodes. We'd sure love to hear it. And now, back to episode 2 of What If You Could with Dr. Mark McDonald. Well, there's so many things right there, but with the jujitsu, that's one extreme. But in your book, I liked how you talked about just listen, just get up, don't order on Amazon. Just let's take baby steps here. Just freaking go down to the Best Buy, buy the damn thing, right? Talk to the person at behind the counter. Maybe talk to another person who's in the store. Hey, are you buying that? What do you think of this? And then race home. Okay, that was your little baby steps, right? Where you're talking about just try to get yourself out there. You don't have to go from zero fear, I mean, tons of fear to zero fear in one day. You kind of laid out, let's just get you there little by little by little. And it reminds me of, back to the little kid scenario. You're in the pool and you're like, jump. I don't want to jump. I'm afraid I'll drown. Just jump, right? They jump. Oh shit. Now for like the next hour, they're jumping. You got to catch them for the next hour. They go again, again. You're like my grandson again. I'm like, ah, shit. I shouldn't have started this, right? But because they broke that little wall of fear, baby steps, and then the next one, and you lead them through. I don't remember what chapter that is, but that's important. People need to get that. Right?
You just
Work
made an
those
important
steps.
point. A lot of people don't get this. They don't understand this. That if you think of fear as like a force field, like a wall of force, if you approach that wall and then you get right up to it, right to the point where you could touch it, and then you back away, you're going to reinforce your fear. You need to start at a level where you can walk through the force field and get to the other side and then turn around and say, wow, that actually wasn't bad at all.
Well,
What hurt
I
me
love
was
the
my
analogy you used
anxiety.
in the book about because we could all relate to this. The boy wants to talk to that girl, so he goes, "I'm going to go up and talk to her." He gets there and then goes, "Ah, shit," and chickens out and goes back. Right? So it's like the force field wall, but it's that human. You want to reenact with her. He wants to talk to her, get her name or whatever, and then and now he feels lesser. And all he had to do was say hi.
And then if he backed away, it would be okay because the next time he could say, hi, what's your name? Or, hi, you look amazing today. What's your name? Or, hi, you look amazing today. What's your name? My name's Gary. Or, hi, you look amazing. What's your name? My name's Gary. I'd really love to get your phone number and take you out to coffee. And now suddenly he's got a date. That can happen very, very quickly. But it's not going to happen if you walk up to her and then she turns to you. And as soon as you make eye contact with her, you turn your head away and you run with your tail between your legs. Because then the next time you see a girl that looks like her that you're attracted to, you're not even going to walk up to her. You're going to say, oh, I remember the last time I walked up to a girl. There's no point. I'm just going to go down the other direction. I'm not even going to approach her physically, much less talking to her. This is key to overcoming fear. If you have to know that whatever tests that you take, whatever challenges you take on, you have to have some, I wouldn't say confidence, but commitment. It's a better word, a commitment to follow it through, even if it's something small, and especially if it's something small, because without that commitment, you're going to reinforce failure. And reinforcing the experience of failure is not good. We all fail, but it should be failure amongst a whole slew of serious attempts. And when I say failure, I don't mean that you went up and gave this woman a compliment, introduced herself, asked you for a phone number and asked her out. And she said, I've got a boyfriend, or I'm not really interested. That's actually not the failure I'm talking about. That's a success.
Mhm.
That's just an outcome you didn't want. Failure is you not meeting your obligation. And that's another distinction that a lot of people don't understand. People avoid challenge because they're afraid of what they call failure. Well, if you do everything you can to achieve success and you don't get what you want, that's not a failure. That's just lack of achievement because the gods weren't smiling on you that day. In my view, a failure really is failing to do everything that's within your power and then backing away from the challenge. That's a personal failure, and that's something that you should never, ever, ever do. Obviously, we've all done it, but you should instill in yourself the goal of avoiding that as much as possible, always pushing through that force field, especially when you're really uncomfortable, so that you can get to the other side and then say, wow, the greatest fear I had was just walking through that door. And then once I did, everything was fine. And even if it didn't turn out the way I wanted, I'm actually still fine. You know what? Whether or not it works isn't the point. I can handle that. What you shouldn't be willing to handle is backing off.
And what we know 90% of the time that happens is that dude faces his fear, walks up, says hello to that chick, or at least got close, but didn't feel bad about it, didn't feel defeated about it. Next time he does say hello to her, he does take her to coffee, whatever. Sure as shit, a week later, that guy's in the gym. Or maybe he stopped eating that extra bag of potato chips. Or maybe he shaved that piece, he all of a sudden feels better and he wants to make himself better. So that little act of breaking through that force field of fear to just say hello to her now has, snowballed into all changing all these great aspects of his life by just making that little change.
That's where self-confidence comes from. Self-confidence is not self-esteem. Self-esteem is unearned value, stolen valor, so to speak. Self-confidence comes from and as a consequence of achievement. And it can be a very small achievement, like pushing yourself through a force field of fear. And when you have greater confidence in anyone, but particularly younger people who are so lacking in that now, that makes them better people. People who are more confident do good. People who lack confidence cannot do good. They are handicapped. They are like paralytics in a wheelchair. They want, but they don't have the motor function to actually move. Confidence is like a capacity to act. It's like the motor function in our body. It doesn't do, it's not an action, but it's the innervation that allows the action to take place. And fear is the antithesis of confidence. Fear is the paralysis. It's a paralytic state. So we need to move from paralytic state to self-actualization state. And I'm thinking like in motorically in terms of movement, but this is true with any action. And I think people don't, in general, I think people are not action focused enough. I think they're reflective and talk focused. I see in my practice more and more people are willing to talk a lot. They're willing to explore. They're willing to gain insight. But what they're not willing to do is actually go out and take action. Even if it's something as simple as saying hello to someone on the street as you're walking past them, something that basic. But they'll spend hours talking about their isolation, their loneliness, their sense of insecurity, and how they know that it's because their mother didn't give them enough chocolate pudding when they were a child. And if only now that they had a better mother figure in their life, they would be able to go out and make friends. They'll go on and on about this. And I just sit there and say, when was the last time you said hello to somebody that you didn't know walking about outside your house? I don't, maybe, I don't know, like a year ago. How the hell are you going to be able to build a social circle, meet women, if you don't even know how to say hello to a stranger because it's just so uncomfortable for you? So action is so important. Without taking action, you're not going to be able to build confidence. Nobody feels more confident because of things they're thinking. They feel more confident because of actions that they've taken, especially in a state of emotional turmoil where they felt really, really scared and they did something. Maybe it worked out, maybe it didn't. That doesn't matter, but they did it and they survived. Then there's that little boost of confidence that they get that makes them want to do it again. like jumping in the pool. And then eventually jumping in the pool is no longer a painful activity. In fact, you've got to shut it down as a dad because they won't stop. They stop talking to strangers and saying hello. It's driving me crazy.
Hey, what do you think about that acronym of fear? Is Zig Ziglar? I don't know who first claimed it. Might have been Zig Ziglar, but false evidence appearing real. Do we still think that fear is an acronym for is fuck everything and run, or or is it false evidence appearing real?
Well, I think that's an oversimplification because fear is not only a delusion of risk. As I said earlier, fear can be an expression of the necessity to take action to survive. I walk in the middle of the street in traffic, I feel really scared. Well, that's not false evidence appearing real. That's real cars about to kill you and run you down. But I think if you're considering fear only in the context of the emotional experience of non-reality based worry of annihilation in a non-threat environment, meaning there isn't really a physical threat involved in most cases, like speaking, like introducing yourself to a stranger, like confronting somebody who is saying or doing something that is illegitimate or harmful, and then you feel the sense of fear. Yes, in that sense, it's false evidence appearing real because the false evidence is in your head. The feeling becomes evidence in your head falsely that you're going to be destroyed if you take action that you are considering taking in that moment. I think that's really what that acronym is trying to convey to people, that most of the time in our society today, we are not actually under threat. Unless you live in, urban America that's run by Democrats, which is half the country. But we're not out hunting. We're not fighting with clubs and knives. We don't have, largely speaking, roaming tribes trying to slit our throats and capture our women. That's not really where we're living now. We might get there, later this year. We're very
Yeah,
close to it, but
no
but
shit.
we're not really in that environment. Most of what we do is very hermetically sealed. It's safe. We don't really even have to go and risk our lives to get something to eat anymore. We can order it on DoorDash. Our interactions with people generally don't turn violent, even though some people scream at us. We can move ourselves around with vehicles that are largely survivable in accidents. We couldn't do that before with canoes and rafts and donkeys going over mountaintops where 30% of the people died before they got to the other side of the hill. That doesn't happen anymore, right? But airplanes, we can go around the world, and what's the chance of us dying in an airplane crash? Less than getting out on our steps and picking up our paper and tripping and breaking our neck. So largely speaking, we're not under real physical threat anymore, human beings in modern society. So when we feel a sense of fear, it's usually, not always, but it's usually uh, not based on reality. It's usually based on a projection. It's based on an expectation of rejection, which is probably one of the greatest fears that we have today. I don't know if we had it a millennia ago. I don't think people cared about rejections. They were so worried about surviving, being eaten. But
Yeah.
now, because we don't have those real problems anymore, they've been supplanted largely with this fear of rejection, with being cast out, with being separated from society, socially speaking. And that's a real big driver right now, which I think is creating a lot of pussified men, histrionic women, and really bad actors.
Is that what you are calling developmental arrest? Is that what people are suffering for? Developmental arrest? We've
Well,
just haven't
developmental
grown,
arrest
or we've
incorporates a
received.
lot of different things.
Mhm.
And I see in women, developmental arrest is really maintaining a state of narcissism. I'm the center of the world, and when I feel wet, my diaper should be changed immediately without even asking for it to happen. And if I'm hungry, I want the milk sprayed right into the mouth from the teat, and I don't even want to have to, to cry to get it, right? And then you think about how young women are behaving right now, and that's basically what they are. They're basically like little infants with diapers walking around screaming when mommy doesn't feed them within 30 seconds.
Yeah.
That's a developmental arrest in young girls. And in young men, I think that the developmental arrest is a lack of inculcation of masculine values, which is physical strength, courage, honor, and mastery. And the arrest that occurs before those four values and capacities have been inculcated into the young man. So he becomes a soy boy, flabby, pale, adipose tissue around his middle, physically weak, high voice, estrogenic. He lacks courage, meaning he's not willing to take risks. He's always trying to placate, and often to histrionic, narcissistic women who are constantly telling him that he's a patriarchal misogynist, and he just nods his head and says, "Yes, yes, yes. What can I do to achieve greatness in your eyes?" And I'm absolutely like that. I'll bend over and take another. Honor, they're not willing to put themselves at risk for their values because they don't have any values. Their value is basically, how can I avoid being pissed on by a bitchy feminist? That's their only value. It's survival. And then finally, mastery. They don't know how to do anything. They have no skills development. They play video games and masturbate to porn, but they don't know how to change a tire. They don't know how to plant a crop, fix a pipe, protect the person that they're with, the woman, through physical combat by fighting and using a weapon. These are skills that you need to have to be a man. And if you don't have any skills, I'm sorry, you're not a man. I don't know what you are, but you're not a man.
And
You're arrested development.
yeah, and what's bizarre is they have no desire to change or to learn any of those. I mean, how did we convince an entire generation of people that toxic masculinity is is a real thing? I mean, how did it's beyond, it's bizarre to me. One of my sons running for city council, very active, a great dad. My other son, I'm just blowing my own horn here, is in the military, very strong dude. Um, but friends in their circle and generation, I mean, these dudes don't even want to move out. Some kids, they don't even want to drive. I mean, I know 30-year-old dudes who don't even want to get a driver's license. I mean, let alone learn something like changing a tire, right? I mean, when did we convince these guys that toxic masculinity is real and being a man is bad? How how did that happen?
I think it's an outgrowth of the feminist movement, which people often want to say was uh, a movement that started with good intentions and then went south. I don't think it ever had good intentions. And I'm referring to post-war feminism, not the suffragette movement in the early
Yeah, we
1900s.
just wanted to get women in the workforce.
This was a huge con that occurred after World War II, and it occurred during World War II, and I guess it continued after that, in the 60s and 70s in particular, that for women to be successful as women, they needed to work, and they should have the right to work. And they not only that, but they really should be working. And if they're not working, then they're just under the thumb of the man. That was the lie that was sold by feminists, which, as many Americans now realize, did nothing economically to help women. It actually simply suppressed wages through supply and demand. Greater supply, same demand, you're going to end up having a lower price point. So wages declined. And now for the last generation and a half, in most cities in the United States, you cannot maintain a middle class household without two incomes. And that was not the case in my parents' generation. So economically, it was a disaster for both men and for women. It was also a disaster in other ways. It was a disaster in male and female roles. Now that the expectation is that men and women split chores equally, and this is actually research driven, the more chores a man performs in the home, and of course he almost has to now, because if the wife is working, it's not fair for her to come home and do all the chores. I totally get that, but it's a false premise because she shouldn't be working full time anyway. So if that happens and they start dividing chores, or God forbid the man does all the chores and the woman is actually working, the sex life of the couple deteriorates. This is proven. This is not my opinion. the more chores a man performs, and I say domestic chores, I'm not talking about fixing the roof, mowing the lawn. I'm talking about cooking, cleaning, washing, taking care of laundry, baby tasks, the less masculine he feels and the less of a man she sees him, even though she loves the fact that she doesn't have to do the chores, she doesn't want to sleep with him anymore. So sex life goes down. It also takes away from the ability of the woman to express her femininity because she's going to be exhausted from working full time. And when women are exhausted and they feel understandably resentful about having to do two jobs, home and work, then they start to become unhappy, depressed, argumentative. They start challenging and testing the husband. He gets frustrated because he thinks, hey, I'm a feminist too. I support you in all of this. And so they wind up with marital conflict because she's actually is actually literally working too much. And now we're in this rut where we're in this sort of endless vicious cycle where both the man and the woman have to support this crazy flood the workforce with women feminist ideology in order to appear to be modern and appropriate and moral and good and ethical and socially accepted. And now that that's all been codified, now we move into the stage that you just asked about, like, how did we get here? And I think it really started from that movement. I think that movement was bad, had bad roots. It became even more perverse over time. And then ultimately, the fruit that it produced, the most recent fruit that it produced, is not just a men and women are equal, and women need to compete with men and women need to win against men, and we need to celebrate that winning. Now we have to actually deride masculinity for being masculine. Because what's the end result? Just like the end result of the gay movement is now not only we have to allow gays to be unmolested by the government and live their lives, which most Americans agree with, even back then they did, even Christians believed, conservative Christians. Now we have to celebrate homosexuality and transgenderism in the street, and we have to allow our children to participate, and we have to sterilize them. If we don't, then we're homophobic and transphobic. So the same thing happened with masculinity. It started out with women need to be equal. That sounds like a good thing. Women need to have the right to work. Well, they should have the right to work. Women should be working. Well, I'm not so sure about that, but what the hell? Men should be doing all the housework. Well, I guess that's fair. I mean, she is working after all. Now we're into the point where we have to actually whip ourselves into a frenzy and say, we are nothing. We are these little lowly men. What can we do to serve you, O great female goddess? Well, you can lick my boot and you can, wash the toilets and be thankful for it. And we ask ourselves, why are women so unhappy and why are men so miserable? Well, this is why. This is what happened. This is where we got to.
Yeah. And look at the third leg of that, though. Now let's look at the third leg, because women went to the workforce. What did we do with the kids? We took the kids and we
So
gave them to
true.
the government and we
That's a
gave
good
them
point.
to
Another
the
consequence.
indoctrination camps, right? So it's like, not
Absolutely.
only are we going to take away your family, not only are we going to take away your wife and your relationship with your husband and wife, that connection, but now we're going to take your kid because you got to put them in daycare, right? I mean, what are you going to do with them? And we're going to take your kid and indoctrinate your kid. So it was a full circle of this breaking of the nuclear family. And like you said, in the 50s, husband went to work. Mom stayed home. She was home when the kids got home. They could afford a home, a car, vacation, right? Now they both go to work and no one can afford shit.
You just pointed
And the
out
kids
something.
completely indoctrinated. So how
It's
did
so
this work
important.
out?
Well, it's based on the feminist lie that women, wives, mothers are miserable taking care of their children. That's a lie. It is false because of a small percentage of women who are not psychologically well and do not enjoy being alone at home with children. And there are going to be people like that. There are some men that just they don't like to work.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? Tough shit. You've got to go get a job. I'm sorry. And no woman would say, well, if the man doesn't really feel like working, if it doesn't make him happy, why should he be forced to? Nobody would say that, right?
Yeah.
But if you say to a woman, well, it doesn't make you happy to be a wife and a mother, tough shit. Oh my God, you misogynist prick. Put this guy in jail. Well, you know what? I kind of have to say the same thing to women. It's fair, right? I'm going to add a little bit of compassion here because I understand that there are some women who don't really feel that fulfilled by being at home and raising children. I get that. Okay, well, there's options for that. Uh, if you have a husband that has a sufficient income to take care of you, you can find other things to do than spend your entire day at home. It's not all or nothing. You know, you can get play groups, you can have girlfriends, you can get hobbies. You could get a part-time job after a few years, after you've raised the children to like age 3 or 4. You don't have to be all in 24/7 for your entire life. And it never was like that anyway, 50 or 60 years ago. Mothers weren't sitting there driving around their children all day long and and listening to every little peep and beck and call and responding to them. They would throw some food in the oven, toss the kids outside and say, don't come home until evening. Mommy's got stuff to do.
Yeah.
Well, one of the reasons why women are complaining now is because they seem to think that this is an all or nothing proposition, that they either have to be a corporate attorney or they have to be saddled with a bunch of children barefoot and pregnant in the kitchen, not able to leave and illiterate. That has always been a lie, always. And
Always
it's a
been a
lie
lie.
today.
We,
So
when
that's why it comes from.
just to blow my own horn again, because I'm an amazing man, and I'm a great dad. But we made that choice, my wife and I. I was waiting tables. I was waiting tables during the day, waiting tables at night. My wife was a travel agent, and she picked up a Friday and Saturday night at a restaurant. And when we decided to have kids, we're like, you know what? Why don't you quit your job and stay home? We're like, well, how are we going to do that? I'm like, who gives a shit? We'll figure it out. We will figure it out. So she quit her job. She stayed home and we had the two kids back to back. And then I got my real estate license and, failed my way up through real estate. Still waiting tables at night. But I mean, we made it work, but we made that choice that mom staying home with the kids was more important than having the brand new car. We just had the both used cars. So I just, I don't know if it's the commercialism, the materialism, the having to be like the Joneses. I'm not sure where we've lost that like family mattered more than the other shit. And that kids should run the family instead of the adults running the family. That corporations should tell us what to do with our homes and our families, and the government should, instead of we making that decision. We've just lost that.
I think it really is what you just described is really the ultimate goal and endpoint of the left. And I'm using that term as kind of an inclusive term, although obviously historically it stems from the Leninist revolution in the early 1900s. But it's expanded now to include not just a class conflict, but a kind of corporate globalist movement of destruction and consolidation of power and resources by a very small number of people that live around the world in all different countries at the expense of everybody else. And how would you achieve that? If you ask yourself that question, let's say someone says, well, I don't know. I don't know if I agree with that. Okay, well, let's just say it's happening. If it were happening, how would you achieve that? Well, the first answer to that question is you would destroy the family. You would turn men and women against each other. You would deride masculinity, and then you would pervert femininity. You would turn children against their parents. You would steal children and put them into camps of indoctrination by the state, i.e. government schools. You would force people to eat toxic, estrogenic, obesity, cancer-inducing, ultra-processed, cheap food products like fast food and every packaged food you see in the supermarkets today in order to keep people from being able to think and act and feel strong and healthy and be able to grow and sustain their own food on their own homeland or their own farms or their neighbors, to make them more reliant on the government to be sick and to get feel-good nutrition, which isn't really nutrient-rich. You would induce chaos in civil society by making people really scared and distrustful of one another on purely meaningless physical characteristics like what color skin they are. You would destroy the ability of the local municipalities to ensure safety by removing police officers and denigrating them and telling people that you should be more afraid of police than you should of gangbangers. I mean, I can go down this list. There's probably 10 or 20 other items. You would open the borders of the country to alien invaders who don't share our values and turn us into a balkanized state of multilingual Babel with people that have no allegiance to the prosperity of the United States. If you do all of these things, you will achieve what I just described. And all of these things are happening. That's not arguable. I'm just listing factual events. You don't even
It's
need
a
to be.
playbook that's being used right
Yes,
now.
it's happening right now. So I challenge people who say, well, the left isn't destructive. Uh, Liberals are great because they're helping to be kind and compassionate and saving people from toxic masculinity and racism, et cetera. I would say, well, look around you. Uh, Tell me what's happening right now in society and where we are. And if you're honest, if you're intellectually honest, you will completely mirror everything I just said. And then once you've done that, then ask yourself, well, then how is it not true that there is an intent behind this by a specific group of individuals, groups, corporations, and organizations? How can you deny that? How can you argue that this is all just chance? And you certainly can't say it's happening because of Donald Trump, because that's called projection. And that's easy to prove by just looking back during the 4 years he was president and then the 4 years after he was president and objectively evaluating the state of affairs in society on multiple levels in terms of safety, economy, international prestige, military strength. All of those objective measures show that we were better off when we had the Nazi, racist, white supremacist in chief as the president. And now with the left/liberal in charge, we are in the greatest state of rapid decline in the history of the country. This is not, I don't think this is polemical, to get back to that word we started out with. I think this is just a description of reality. And if you don't accept it, then you are naive or you are dishonest.
Well, I think you need to eat bugs and you have nothing and you're going to like it. And you'll feel better by just eat the bugs, have nothing, and you're going to like it. I love everything that you bring, and I love your thought process, and I love your honesty, and I love the fact that you're speaking up, and probably I don't know this for a fact, but probably to a lot of your own demise sometimes. I'm sure there's people that aren't real happy with some of the things you talk about, but you end your book with humor. And considering everything we've taken into account and the doom and gloom and what's truly happening, and the fear for our families, our men, our women, our children, our world, but you bring it back and you end with humor. That you've got to have a sense of humor, otherwise you'd freaking blow your brains out, right, with all the stupid shit. And when it comes to fear, let's face it. I mean, even if I deal with grief. You mentioned grief in your book a little bit in the triangle and stuff. But when you have a really big cry and you're just really sobbing in sorrow, after that's over, you just start laughing for some stupid reason. It's a natural thing. But tell me why you ended it with humor and why it's so important we can laugh at ourselves and others.
On a basic level, I think what humor represents is the taking of perspective. And it's the antithesis of narcissism. If you're entirely focused on yourself, looking at your belly button all day long, by definition, you don't have a perspective because you're just locked into yourself. The only way to have perspective is to step away and look at yourself from a distance. That's the definition of the word. And that fosters the ability to grow and to think. Pure narcissists cannot grow and cannot think because everything is self-referential. When you have a sense of perspective, it allows you to make better judgments and to improve upon yourself by noticing where your flaws are and where you've made mistakes. There is a victim, so to speak, in every joke. And that victim should be you. You should be the one that has been called out and exposed. You should be the emperor, the naked emperor, who realized when the little boy pointed his finger at him that he's actually butt naked. He should be the butt of the joke, and you should be the butt of the joke. And when you are, and you can laugh at that, that 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 proves that you're not narcissistically driven, at least in that moment, because you've stepped away from yourself and you've looked at yourself and you said, "That's a really funny guy over there. What a moron he was." And that was me. And that's how we get better. That's why I think humor is so important. It's not just because it's entertaining, and it's not just because there's levity and allows us to feel good, all of which is true and all of which is really important, especially now in this heavy, dense environment where nobody's having fun. I love fun, and fun is play, and fun is creativity, and fun is imagination and spontaneity. And without that, we're just automatons. But in addition to all of that, on a more basic level, a more important uh, psychological growth level, I think that humor drives the individual building up of a sense of perspective. And we have lost all sense of perspective in the last few years, 100% gone. And if we could get that back, even with people that are a little loopy in their thoughts and maybe they're not thinking critically, if we can get them to just laugh at some of the weird shit that they're doing, like riding around their bicycles with masks on, and get them to laugh at that, even though they're still afraid and they still think that it's going to kill grandma if they don't do it, if they can laugh at themselves riding around on their bicycle, that's the first little crack in their psychosis to allow themselves to say, you know what, this is bullshit, and then take the thing off and throw it on the ground. That's where it starts. Humor is where growth starts.
Yeah, and I think, like you talked about the people that used to have a sense of humor when you'd go into the bookstore, you'd go in the coffee shop, you can kibitz with people. And now shit, people have just completely they just have lost humor. And like you mentioned in the book, you can't be completely fearful and happy, funny at the same time. They just don't work. You can't be just curled up in a fetal position. The world's coming to an end and start cracking jokes. Or the triangle of what grief, sex, that triangle I thought was
Anxiety, humor, and sex.
yes, anxiety, humor, and sex. You can't be, they don't. You have to be one or the other, right? And I
Pick a
just thought that
state.
super
If you're
interesting.
anxious, you can't get it up. If you're laughing, you're not going to be worried. If you're banging away at your partner in the bed, you're probably not going to be laughing or worried. Now, obviously, there's a few exceptions at
Right.
times, but like a full state embodiment, you can't embody both of those, two of those three states simultaneously. It is impossible. Sorry.
Yeah, I just thought that was great. I love that, and I laugh at everything. And what is it called? Self-depreciating humor? Is that what they call it? Make
Self-deprecating
fun of?
humor.
Yeah, I pick on myself all the time. I laugh at myself all the time. We laugh all the time in our family, and I have so many friends that have just flat out lost their sense of humor
Yeah.
that we just used to laugh at shit. And I'm like, you gotta let some shit go, bro. I mean, like one of my favorite shirts is Buddha. Buddha said, dude, you gotta let some shit go. And it's just true. And if we just keep holding on to this fear
Yeah.
and especially the fear that doesn't even exist, right? That we've created for ourselves or allowed them to create for us. We've got to get
Mhm.
rid of it. Doc, you're wonderful. I love Freedom from Fear. Love this book. United States of Fear. This one will shake you a little bit.
If
Love
you're
this
if you're
one.
up if you're up for a real rude awakening, read United States of Fear. That's going to shake you to the core. But if you want to therapeutically move into the future into a state of contentment and freedom, then Freedom from Fear is a much more mild tonic to take.
Well, and the thing about Freedom from Fear that I like, I mean, I read books with a highlighter. I just do.
Uh-huh.
I highlight. I earmark. I mean, I just
Hmm.
that's how I read. But Freedom from Fear is an actual 12-step guide to personal and national recovery. It really is. It's not just a book that you go through. I mean, this book within a year will be beaten to death. I mean, it'll be dog-eared. It'll be funny. So it really is a guide. It's a workbook. It's a program. It's not just a book you read once and put on the shelf. If you do, you're missing out. And I'm afraid if you do read it and and you can't see through what you're trying to do, that's just really sad too. Because what you're trying to do with love, kindness, little kick in the ass, like Biden said, and humor is that you're just trying to help people come out of it. Right, Doc? I mean, you're not trying to be mean. You're not trying to come off as some ogre or left-hating dude. I mean, you're honestly trying to care and heal.
I believe that freedom in not just a political sense, but freedom from internal constraints is the premise of a good life. And that without that, it's near impossible, particularly in the latter, the psychological constraints. We can succeed with political constraints. We have workarounds. But if you're internally constrained psychologically, if you live in your own prison, your own psychologically determined prison, then you will be hampered throughout your entire life in your development and in your capacity to do good. This is not a political statement. This is a statement from the point of view of a psychiatrist who has seen thousands of people over the course of my career and seen where people fail, where they don't succeed, where they remain locked in misery for their lives. And it starts with their refusal or their rejection of breaking out of their own prison. So this book is like a guide, a map on how to get out of that prison and how to free yourself from your own constraints so that you can go out and then do good in whatever way you want to do that good. I am not going to tell you how to do that. I'm just going to tell you how to get out of the cell. And then from there, it's up to you.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Now, you might have answered it, but I always end my podcast with asking someone a question, and I never give it to them ahead of time because I kind of want it to come from the head or from the heart. But regardless of the books and your practice or what's happening in the world and the universe, but if there's something that you'd like to leave us with, this is a core thought or a core belief, if there's something that you kind of your mantra that you've always had or whatever that you'd like to share and leave us with, what would that be? What's that last little message you'd kind of like to touch on for us?
I would say that if you are one of these people, and I think there's more and more of these people now, the numbers are growing day by day because of the extreme state of tension that we're all living in, extreme state of anxiety for all the reasons that I talked about so far with you today. And if you're one of these people who senses this and is discomforted by it, but all you're doing is hiding from it. All you're doing is talking about it in hushed whispers with your spouse or your children or your close friend circle in the bar, looking right and left because you don't believe it's worth it to do anything except talk. Now more than ever, this is the time for you to start taking action. And of course, I would love for you to take action the way I describe in my book, in Freedom from Fear, because I think that's a great way to inculcate action and develop perspective. But even if you don't, and you don't buy my book, and you don't read it, and you don't do what I tell you to do, if you can simply start to take actual action every single day, and that could be simply waving and saying hello and smiling to someone as you leave the house, if you haven't done that for the last year, that makes an enormous difference, not just your community, but it makes a difference to you. It turns you into a different person. I firmly believe that most Americans today could be taking more action than they are to improve themselves and to improve their communities. You do not need to worry about what's going on at the top. Your ability to influence that is incredibly minimal. But if you do focus on the you, the family, the friends, and then the community in that order, that will make an enormous difference in your life and the lives of the people that you actually see day in and day out. Not the people you see on your phone and the computer and the news, because you're never going to meet those people. The people that you actually get into relationships with, those are the people that matter. So start taking actual steps, actual actions to influence those people's lives and it will affect you, and you will feel better for it immediately, and it will turn you into a better person. And then ultimately, if more people do that, that will affect the top, and we'll actually have a transformation at the national level. But that's where it starts.
I love it. I love it. I agree 100%. It starts with us. It always does.
Yes, it
So,
does.
everybody, you've been exposed to, although you're out there, everybody, but Dr. Mark McDonald. Again, this is a great book. We're going to post the book on the site. We're going to put it on YouTube and all over the place so you could find Dr. Mark McDonald if you'd like to, which I think you should. And I think you need to step away from what you're worried someone would think if you read or listened to what he's saying. Don't don't let anybody tell you you can't open your mind to other ideas and thoughts, processes. And I think that's what doctor's trying to do here, is just get you to step out and think a little bit differently. Take a look at what's really going on and what your gut is telling you. And I think you'll see what we have here is right. So, Dr. McDonald, you've been awesome. So grateful for your time. I know that you're busy. We'll get this up for everybody to see and learn more about Dr. Mark McDonald.
And if you want to read more about what I do weekly or in my events, talks, the podcast, where I am, you can always find all of that and even become a free subscriber to my weekly missives by email at dissidentmd.com.
So what it's dissidentmd.com, because I messed that up a couple times.
dissident.
Perfect.
A
So all the
dissident, like
good
a
stuff.
Soviet dissident, because when you have a differing opinion, you become a dissident. And my opinions definitely differ.
Yeah, yeah, but it's good. It's good. And no, but we'll have all that on there so people can actually just click on it and link to it and find it.
Fantastic.
But all right, my friend, I appreciate it so much. You're awesome, and we
Thanks,
will
Gary.
talk soon. Thank you, everybody. See you soon. Thanks again for joining us on another episode of What If You Could podcast. Please subscribe, like, share, and give us any feedback. We'd love to hear it. And remember, if you can dream it, you can do it. See you next time.